Won't you join me in welcoming our guests to the platform?
So firstly, we have Shannon Passero. She owns Shannon Passero Design. Is the co-founder and creative director and designer of women's clothing brands Pure Handknit and Neon Buddha. Ethical work standards have been a huge part of Shannon's operations. If you go to her website, there's almost not enough room for all of the amazing causes that she supports in the community. My wife absolutely loves her store, so it's a little bit dangerous to go there at times. But it's really, really nice to have you here. You also, the grant for 2 female entrepreneurs up to $12,500 per entrepreneur is an amazing program that's now in its 3rd year. In the middle, we have Betty Lou Souter, who is the CEO of Community Care St. Catharines and Thorold. She's responsible for the overall management of the agency. They provide emergency food and clothing, emergency assistance, access to shelter, and support to less advantaged individuals in Niagara. She has 40 years of experience in the voluntary sector. She's received the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, the Power of Humanity through the Canadian Red Cross. And in 2011, Betty Lou was one of 11 Ontarians who received the Ontario Medal for Good Citizenship from Lieutenant Governor David Onley. And she's currently a board member of Cancer Care Ontario and a past board chair of the Niagara Health System. Jim Letwin, I know him as Professor Letwin. He taught me around, well now it's close to 10 years ago, at McMaster when I did my MBA. He taught the course that I now teach, Marketing Communications. So if any of my students have taken the MBA Marketing Communications with Jim, it's his fault. If you didn't like it, no. Jim is outside of his amazing work at DeGroote, and he got me inspired to look at ads in a different way and to dissect campaigns and things like that. He is the CEO and co-owner of Kelley, which is a great advertising agency and full service agency across a bunch of marketing services. He actually developed the Canadian Blood Services slogan, "It's in you to give." He's worked with Harley Davidson, Canadian Tire, and a bunch of other household names, so we feel really lucky to have you here as well. And he's very active with regards to the United Way. And then, as I said, I have notes on myself, and Susan LeBlanc wrote them for me, so thank you. I'm an assistant professor of marketing, as Barry mentioned. My research is on CSR, which is, so I probably said the word CSR 8 billion times in my writing and daily conversations that bore my wife. CSR is corporate social responsibility, so we'll get that word and that term established. I'll try and not use too many kind of buzzwords. Also, I look mostly at what consumers, how they respond to CSR. I look at how companies advertise it. And in my previous career, I was very involved with volunteer initiatives. I don't think I could do it now, but I used to walk up the CN Tower, on the inside, obviously. And we raised money for United Way and so on. So I've always been kind of a fan of volunteer initiatives, always felt like we can do more. And I'm really interested to hear your take, because we have someone who does a lot of socially responsible programs, someone who partners with corporations who are looking for an opportunity to do good in the community, and someone whose clients are looking for the right way to position it in the marketplace. So I think across all of us, we all have very unique viewpoints. So I probably said too much about myself already, so I apologize for that. What I'd like to do to start our discussion is, every company is doing some sort of CSR activity, or ethics, or an environmental initiative, or has ads about the good things they're doing in the community. I'd like to get your opinion on who are the companies that are doing it right, who stands out for the right reasons, and what are they doing that makes it work as well, in your opinion?
Would you like me to start?
Sure.
Well, certainly I have depended for many years on CSR,
Yep.
From corporate social responsibility and the work that I do. But I think in the last few years, there's several that have stuck out in my mind. And I range from someone like Bell Media, who said, let's talk with mental health, and how much it's done for the whole mental health sector, because I do have some experience working in the mental health sector. And it goes on down, if you look in Niagara, you have Meridian. Meridian does extraordinary work. They have a commitment with their volunteers. Not only do they have great philanthropy, but they also encourage their employees by giving them time off to go and volunteer so many days a week. They do so many days a month. If I ever need any help at the agency, I can always call Meridian and they'll always send me some volunteers, so that's really rewarding. I look at Walker Industries. Walker Industries has done a tremendous amount, and they use the C principle. They look at things from a lens of social responsibility, economics, and environment. And that's how they use, that's the focus that they use. And you could go on down and you can look at the smaller organizations like, I know there's people sitting in the audience right now, and my friend Shannon on my left. But then you go to some people who give up their time. They don't give up their money because they don't have the ability to give up their money, but they give up their time. So it's a very wide range. So in my opinion, everybody gets it right to a lesser or greater degree.
Okay.
And I think that the ones that stand out, the ones that's been most successful, if you look at what Bell Media has done with children's mental health right now, that's huge in the mental health piece. And it's easy. Yes, did Bell benefit from it from a marketing perspective? Perhaps. But they also drew an awareness to mental health and the importance of supporting mental health greater than anybody's had the ability to do before. So how do you leverage that? I think it's the most important thing. And they had somebody who felt strongly about the issue within their corporate structure, connected with the right people, and boom, there you go.
So I think corporate social responsibility takes on so many different forms now these days. And is my microphone on? So I really feel that, let's take some examples that are slightly different. I love the Bell Media campaign. I think Let's Talk is a wonderful reflection of who they are, because you use their services, you're obviously you're talking. And I think the reason it works is that they're not the ones who are really delivering the message. They open up a channel and they say, can we talk about something that's important to us? And it's something that we, as Canadians, don't talk about enough. So I think it's a relevant subject to think about. But if you think about companies, they are brands. And so you think, well, what's a brand? A brand is it's a relationship, and it's defined by a promise. And the idea is through that promise to create value and build trust. And so as I look across the landscape and I look at organizations like WestJet, who in their last campaign, and as you well know, you've probably seen them online, they surprise people at Christmas time. They do wonderful things for their customers. They are every WestJet person, because they receive profit sharing, they're classified as owners. And what's interesting is that if I were to ask you as an audience, who has more on-time deliveries versus schedule, Air Canada or WestJet? Most of you might think it's WestJet, but the answer is Air Canada, generally. And you can analyze this. There are websites you can go to and look at it by quarter. But if you look at WestJet's website, it says they've got their guarantee because they care. And Air Canada talks about the fact that they're the biggest airline in Canada. And so we just have this natural tendency to ascribe things to WestJet because of the tone and manner of how they present themselves. And if you haven't seen it, they just recently, in their most recent campaign for Christmas, interviewed a bunch of people from Fort McMurray. And we all know what happened there with the terrible fires, and the people were displaced. And you might also recall that they gave a number of free flights away, and they gave discounted flights. The cost of the flights were discounted significantly for people who were put out and displaced and had to come up with emergency schedules. And Air Canada, as you might recall, was criticized because they actually raised the prices on some of those people. So you think, well, is Air Canada a bad company? No. Air Canada is actually a very great company, and they've done quite well in the most recent year. I just think that some companies understand who they are as a brand. They create experiences and campaigns and programs that demonstrate and translate their values and their beliefs and their principles into their behaviors better than others do.
I think speaking from a clothing industry component. One, somebody that's excelling beyond belief, I think, is a woman named Fisher. It's an interesting setup because her website is, it's something that you can shop, but more than half of the website is about her responsibility to many multifaceted levels of corporate responsibility, whether it being ethical work standards, sustainable fabrics, talking about the fashion industry as a whole as a polluter, and she's gone ahead and given a commitment and laid out what their company as a whole is, what they wish for. They may not obtain it, hopefully they do, but they've laid it out so it's very open for people to see in a very understandable way. So I think she, along with WestJet, and who we talked about, we met before, and think that, certainly locally Meridian is a huge supporter of women in business as well, and equal pay for equal work, and that kind of, certainly that resonates with me locally as well. But Eileen Fisher personally is somebody that's doing it really, really well.
Okay. Yeah, to build off Jim's point of WestJet maybe not performing better on typical attributes, but then performing better on how they position themselves as the caring brand in Canada. Do you think ethics and being a socially responsible company can actually overshadow typical attributes that we think of, or is it sort of still seen as a liability for your performance? So there is, it's research related, so if you need to nod off for a moment, that's perfectly acceptable. Some research suggests that there's sort of this liability associated with being sustainable, or fair trade coffee doesn't taste as good because it's fair trade, and things like that. So there's sort of this perceived, you're starting at a deficit on the performance aspect if you're focusing too much on social responsibility.
Well, I personally think that the activities that you engage in should be a reflection of what your brand or your beliefs stand for. So if the goal is to simply try to position the company on a CSR attribute, I think that that's probably going to fail. Because I think people will suggest that, first of all, it won't feel authentic because it will come from nowhere. And then I think, secondly, people are just, have learned not to trust things that don't feel that they're a fit. So, if the behaviors, and first of all, when we talk about communication, if you were to ask the broad question, well, what is communication? Well, it's really, if you think about it, especially in today's world, it's the meaning attached to behavior. Because I can say a lot of things, but my actions, if you remember what your mom told you when you were just young, she said actions speak louder than words, didn't she? And so I think corporations and we as individuals develop say-do gaps. And I think sometimes if we create a commitment that seems incongruous with our behavior, then people are automatically going to say, well, that's funny that they say this and they're promising that they're going to save this sector of the world or whatever they're trying to do, but their behavior doesn't seem to indicate that this is who they really are. And I think as consumers, we've gotten reasonably sophisticated. We've got pretty good bullshit detectors, I think. And so I personally believe that if we're going to make claims, I think we have to be prepared to live those things through all the aspects of our behavior. And I think it can set us back if we're not careful. I don't know what the ladies think about that.
Well, no, certainly, I don't disagree with you. I think there's some aspects of it, but there are some people who will only purchase things that people have demonstrated a social conscience, or they're trying to save the environment or things like that. And I think that they do it from the purest of perspectives, and they realize that that's consistent with my values. And I think you have to be able to look at things and say, does this align with my value system? And if it aligns with my value system, then you can commit to that, and you can make that purchase. And I know that some people won't do anything that has anything to do with a tobacco company.
Right.
And is that right or is that wrong? They have deep pockets and they have the ability to make a lot of change. But there are some people that feel absolutely it's not consistent with my value system. So what aligns with your value system is usually what drives us and what makes us do what we do, in my opinion.
Right.
And I think, when you look at somebody like Google and their social responsibility is don't do evil. That's a pretty broad statement, right? And just being aware of somebody like we were talking about the Tom's shoes. So their entire company is built around making a pair of shoes and selling a pair of shoes and donating a pair of shoes. So that it's an interesting, that whole business model is based on a corporate responsibility, and he's also leveraging a marketing component to, he has to make sure that he donates those shoes, and has to tell that story.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting component that it's business building and marketing of that, but it's also in line with, you're feeling good wearing the shoes and telling the story, and there's an organic story that's being told because you feel the consumer is feeling good about buying a product that's in line with the values, right? Where I think it's interesting, Google, it's like, don't do evil, but what does that really mean? You know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty broad statement, right? So,
Well, especially in a world where there are not only facts, but alternative facts, right? What might that involve? So, listen, I think things like fair trade are for coffee. It says, hey, we're going to treat our growers, our farmers fairly, and it almost becomes the price of entry now in the coffee business to be fair trade. So what once was a differentiator now becomes something that's the same as everyone else. So the question becomes, if I'm at least that's a starting point. So, and I think probably you remove yourself from being disqualified from a purchase because you're at least part of something that's important to most people these days. So I agree with the fact that you've got to at least be part of the broader, attempt to do well in the industry in which you operate. No doubt about it.
And I think we all feel that it's incumbent upon us to make sure our community is a good community, and we're only as strong as the weakest link in our community. And not only this particular community in which we live, but community has a very broad definition. And I think we all feel that if we can do something to make somebody's life a little better, and if we gain from it too, that's not a bad thing. And I think we have to get over that aspect that, let's not be self-serving here, but if I have the ability to make somebody's life better, and I gain from it as well, that's a really positive win-win.
Yeah, well, you can't help anyone if you don't survive.
Exactly.
It's the old story, right? If you're on all these airplane references, but if you're on an airplane, they say if the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself and then help the person next to you. Only because if you're dead, it's pretty hard to help somebody. So I think there has to be an inherent sustainability in business, and so enlightened capitalism is an important part of our collective long-term sustainability. There are aspects of capitalism that most of us don't like. We just haven't managed to find a better alternative just yet. So I agree with you. I think there's got to be some sort of ability to generate some return on activities. I just don't think that we necessarily want to set out for every aspect of our CSR to be something that generates an ROI. And I think a lot of companies have moved in that direction, saying we're going to move it under a special area. We don't do anything that doesn't generate an ROI. Well, philanthropic giving, at its very core, isn't really about giving an ROI. It's really, maybe it's about making the people who work at your company feel like they're part of something special. And there is benefit there.
I think one of my favorite authors is Kahlil Gibran, and he has always said that a true philanthropist is those who doesn't have to look into the face of the receiver. And I think anybody who is a true philanthropist doesn't have to get the rewards back. They know that they're making a difference. And we had that conversation earlier, how you can do it quietly. It's not about you, it's about whose lives you can enrich. And I tell my story today about a young man, his name was Chase. He was 6 years old, and he came to me. He'd had a birthday And he collected food instead of getting presents. And so I thought, well, I'm going to teach him a little lesson. So I said, what's your favorite thing in these bags? And he said, Honey Nut Cheerios. So I said, why don't you come with me? So he picked up his box of Honey Nut Cheerios, and we walked upstairs and we walked into the food room. And I said, where do you think these should go? And he saw the shelf and he says, I think they should go over here. So he went over and put them on the shelves, and I said, that's good. And he said, they're my favorite, my real favorite, he said. And I said, but you've given them away to somebody else now. And he said, yes, I have. And he was proud as punch. He's walking down the stairs. And I said, I want you to do one thing for me, Chase. Tomorrow morning, when you're getting up and you have your breakfast and you have your Honey Nut Cheerios, I want you to think of that other little boy in our community that's having Honey Nut Cheerios for the first time. He's never had them before because his money hasn't been able to afford them. But you, Chase, gave them to him without knowing who he is. And he's having Honey Nut Cheerios that you have every day. And he said, really? And he went to his mom and he said, I gave somebody Honey Nut Cheerios for their breakfast tomorrow, and they're going to be happy because of me. Now there's a life lesson learned. And I know that Chase will be back, and I know that he'll continue to do good things like that because he felt good about what he did. And that's the most important thing, is to make people feel good about when they do things. And if you get kids when they're young, and I know there's some parents in the audience and some parents sitting beside me whose kids have a strong social conscience, and I know the world's going to be a better place because of them, because they're taught at an early age how important it is to give back. And if they give back in their own way, when they get to work, they're going to encourage other people to do the same. So it all sort of starts, to me, with the value system that you have within your own self, that you learn sitting around your dining room table, or through your parents, or however it happens. And once that is within you, you have that strong value, good things happen.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to talk about how companies can balance still getting credit and how do they position the way that they communicate about the good deeds that they're doing, because sometimes there is backlash. I mean, there's definitely companies who have not positioned their ad campaigns very well by spending triple on the amount of media buys for their, I'm not here obviously to pick on individual companies, so I will say a large tobacco company. Is there such thing as a small tobacco company? Probably not. So big tobacco company spent $150 million on advertising a $50 million anti-smoking campaign directed at kids. And then there's some companies that there's actually a huge awareness gap amongst consumers. Some do amazing things and nobody knows as consumers. So there's been some interesting research that shows that companies that are actually spending the right amount or huge amounts aren't often aligned with the rankings of perceptions of consumers as well. So how do you position it without being like, we're so nice and we do so many great things and we save babies and puppies every day, but then you're bragging about it. So how do you kind of do that the right way?
If I speak about our company, I think you have to do it organically. You have to do it passionately. I think when you're passionate about something, whether it's corporate social responsibility or just what you do every day, I think that comes across if that's part of your mandate as a company. Like our management strategy is, we worked for almost 2 decades with a group of almost 6,000 workers in Thailand, and there's a minimum wage. So you say, wow, Thailand's come a long way in 20 years to introduce a minimum wage. I don't really believe in a minimum wage because I believe more in a pay scale that's a living wage. So, so some people say, well, there's a minimum wage, that's why the government of Canada pulled out from a investment or third world idea of Thailand, but at the same time, you can't live at that minimum wage. So we never paid minimum wage, we always paid what we felt was a living wage that was community voice of our workers and what, rewarded them for growing our company. So I think it's just it's interesting. I think it's the responsibility of Canadians, because I can't speak to the US. I think it's our responsibility to do good things and be responsible and do business in a way that you're proud of the business that you do, and you can sleep at the end of the day and you can look your kids in, you know, you want to teach respect. So I think if all of those kind of basic life things happen, you will also have corporate responsibility as well. You know, if it falls into line, like you said, it doesn't have to be corporate responsibility, can be raising money by giving time. It doesn't have to be the amount of money that you give. And I think that's really important. You know, we talked about this, that it doesn't have to be like you work really hard, you save all your money, and then once you make it or you think you've made it, then you donate. I think it, and I'm sure, you know, Brock communicates this to the students, and I know they do, is that it can be, if it's $30, if it's an amount of money, or it's time, or it's effort put in, it can be the smallest amount, because if everybody does a little bit, it's all gonna make a big difference in the end. You know, it can't just be relied upon by WestJet, or it can't be, you know, Canadian Tire is another really, Tim Hortons also with their camps and things. I know the bigger companies are doing some great things, but I think it's everybody in Niagara that needs to help, you know.
You go to Brock, for example, Goodman School of Business. I mean, they have supported community care for many years. It used to be Ace Brock, and they were business students. And what was really important to me, they recently just done their 5 days for the homeless again, where they slept outside, and it wasn't too cold this year, which is really good. But they generate money for us. But what's most important out of all that is they tell our story, and they tell our story from a different perspective. And when somebody else tells your story, it's a lot more powerful. And so I acknowledge these students who normally wouldn't be sleeping outside, but have a greater understanding of what the issues are, and they can go and tell their friends who tell whatever. And then when they get into business, they have that ability. I also look at what Dr. Wright was talking about before with Kelley and Billy and Kemp with the Goodman School of Business. They came along and they did a study for us on a project that we wanted to do. We could pay for that, but we were able to do that. So they leveraged that. So that's social responsibility. They didn't have to do that. And they came along and they did an absolutely amazing presentation and valued it, I don't know how many $1,000 that we couldn't be able to do. Businesses do it too. I know I was talking to somebody today that they've offered their HR department, which is a challenge for nonprofits and smaller organizations, to work with them for 6 weeks to develop a plan and a strategy. But that's corporate responsibility, and it's not money, it's time, and it's talent. So it's time, talent, and treasure. So I think realistically, we look at it in a different, it doesn't always have to be money. It has to be other things.
I think the question was, how is it that there seems to be an imbalance sometimes? Some firms spend an awful lot of money on CSR, yet they're not known for it. So I think a lot of it depends on where a brand starts. So I think a year ago this past Christmas, when the BBC investigated Apple for the way that their products are being manufactured, people falling asleep on the assembly line and giving very few, you know, breaks, and young children that are pulling tin from mines that go into the iPhones, right? And I saw this, you know, the BBC, they're pretty thorough, and they're pretty assertive, you know, they have that British accent. And it looks like they're ruining, you think to yourself, this is really going to hurt iPhone sales. Well, they increased quite dramatically right after that. And so you think, I have this close relationship with my iPhone, and I'm guessing if I ask the audience how many people have iPhones, there'll be a lot of hands go up. It's something you spend, most people are more worried about losing their iPhone than they are their wallet or their purse, because it's that important to us. So we have this relationship with that brand, and it kind of has this armor around it, that when they do something wrong, we think, oh, they wouldn't do something like that. They wouldn't mean that. So I think a lot begins with, first of all, what's the perception of that business overall? Do they seem to care about me as a customer? And if we have evidence to suggest that, we will tend to discount information that we get that's inconsistent with our current belief systems. We do this as a survival mechanism. So I think that's part of the explanation as to why some brands spend tremendous amounts of money trying to demonstrate that we're not as bad as you think. But if you start from a position of distrust, and I'm sure your research shows this, that the index of trust for most corporations now is lower than it was historically. People don't trust corporations. They trust their family members, then they trust their friends online. More so than they trust the corporation or the brand. I think that's a fundamental explanation as to why we've got these distances between what people spend and the good that they might actually do versus the perception of who they are. So I think it stems from a lot of that background. We develop relationships through a lot of cues during the day with the interaction with these brands. And so I think that's a possible explanation. And I've worked with clients who do a lot of great things in their businesses, and most people would say, yeah, I don't know, I have no idea what they do. And it's really tough because it's in that larger envelope of the reputation they already have.
Yeah, actually, one of my colleagues and I were talking about ads such as BP had a huge campaign to say how good of a job they were doing to clean up the Gulf Coast. It was kind of like, right, but you're responsible for that in the first.
Yeah.
So, and Coke had some ads where they were saying they were on the forefront of fighting obesity because they have 0 calorie and Diet Coke options and various flavored waters with aspartame instead of sugar and things like that. So I was at a sustainability conference and I mentioned this before. Pepsi was saying, yeah, we have solar panel roofs at our parking structures. We encourage all of our employees to carpool. We're a zero waste facility, and someone stood up and said, cool, you make Doritos and sugar water, so who cares? And I was like, oh, how does the person from Pepsi, Frito-Lay respond to that? And how, if you are doing these good things, one approach that I've seen that I thought was quite effective as well is when you are sort of a mixed bag across the spectrum of CSR, Marks and Spencer's in their sustainability report would say, these are the things that we're doing incredibly well at, these are the things that we're really proud of, and these are the things we can clearly do better. So maybe there's a balancing act and self-awareness of stuff you have to improve upon, because I personally don't think all big companies are bad or all small companies are great and wonderful. I think there's a mixed bag of everything, and I think there are big companies that are doing good things. I don't think there's any one perfect approach, and that's sort of why I like doing what I do, is because there's so many new things to uncover. I was saying, like, if I did research even 20 years ago, it would just be a straight line. Like, do more CSR, donate more money, and people will like you more. But now it's, are you supporting the right cause? Do you have the right target audience? Are you from an industry that people trust and like to begin with? Are you a company that people have faith in as well? So there's also kind of the weird double-edged sword thing where you have a good reputation for CSR, you do one bad thing and it's actually way worse than if you had never done anything good ever. Like, how could Tom's do something like that? They're so nice, and so there's so many different things kind of going on with CSR. So I've kind of wondered, what do you see is the future for it? Do you see social media being a positive element of communicating CSR? So there's retweet for $1 and things like that, and company cause alliances, or give a like and we'll donate 50 cents and so on with the Bell Let's Talk approach. It has been criticized as being sort of slacktivism because you're sitting back in your chair and you're like, yeah, like, retweet, yeah, and you're not actually potentially doing anything, but yeah, so what do you think of social media and CSR?
I think it's got much faster. I think the idea of fast fashion and fast social, and there's a company called Fashion Revolution, and so what they do is they have, it's coming up actually in the next week or so, and they ask someone like me to post a picture of where the clothes are made. So they do, they're asking you to post in the factory and so there's an insider view of what actually is going on. And I think when we relied just on the newspapers and the picture of, I thought it was very mindful. I really like the idea of always pretend that it's on the front page of the news. Well, I think given the current state of what's happening in the country below us. You know, everything's much faster. Now we're questioning everything. And so, you know, the spin or the use of advertising and guidance, you know, for an agency, for a company like me, is that much more important, because the message can get blurred so easily. And we talked about, I have a Women in Business grant, and there was a lot of pushback of comments after an article in the local paper about, you know, quite negative comments about me giving money to a Women in Business grant, which I thought was an all good thing. It was, you know, I was happy to do it, and it felt good, and it was good for our CSR, and but there was a lot of negative comments. So it was pretty, you know, it was pretty humbling, but again, that's quick. That never used to happen, right?
No.
You used to wait till the next week and they'd have a comment. You'd read the comment section in the newspaper. Now everything is, you know, the President of the United States is on Twitter. Like, who the heck? Well, that's incredible.
But it's
So-
to get your story out and get your
Yeah.
message out, and you have control of that message. And I think that's important, because before you would rely on somebody else delivering the message, but you have the ability through social media to control your message and deliver the message that you want to get out there. And it is fast, and it happens all the time. And I was a real negative person about social media several years ago, and I thought, well, you know, where is this going? But now I see the benefit of it, because it tells a story.
Yeah.
You have control of the message, and it gets it to where you want it to be.
Well, I'm not so sure you have control of the message insofar as what you say. You have control over what you say.
Yeah.
What you lose control over very, very quickly is what others say about what you've just said and how they
Yeah.
twist it. And so if there's anybody here who's ever released anything on social media and found that it devolves quite quickly into something that you had never in your wildest dreams had imagined, then you know what I'm referring to. And I think so. I think where the Achilles heel of social media is that it's going to continue to lose its credibility as a reliable source for anything. Because you know, Donald Trump has referred to fake news. Fake news is a part of it. I read a statistic the other day that 23% of Americans have confessed to releasing fake news through social media channels that they control. These are just everyday Americans. 23%. So almost 1 in 4 have said, I've purposely released fake news. So, and that number apparently is expected to grow. Because what we've got is we've got these special interest groups and compartmentalization of belief systems, and that facts don't matter. The other statistic that the study quoted is that Trump supporters were shown pictures of the inauguration and for Obama versus Trump, and it was so obvious that there were fewer people at the Trump inauguration, and the vast majority of them said, well, it looks like there were more people there for Donald Trump. So So I think the danger for social media is that rather than bringing truth to people, it tends to create more polarizing impact because it's so hard to discern what the truth is. And I think we need media outlets, and no matter how inaccurate they may be from time to time, right, that we trust to be able to release information that we say, well, the chances of that being more or less true is much higher now than it used to be. So that's a concern I have. And I think we can release anything we want on social media. How other people comment on it and how it devolves or permeates from there is kind of the interesting part. But it's here to stay.
Yeah. You look at somebody noted today on a comment that Prime Minister Trudeau made, and they took a negative spin in the Toronto Star, and they said, can you imagine the Toronto Star saying something negative about the Prime Minister?
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, so
Yeah.
it's media, for example, if you look at the Toronto Star, it's perceived as being a liberal paper.
Sure.
And if you look at the National Post, it's a conservative paper. So are you getting a bias in any of that? So, I mean, it's a challenge. And
Yeah, my personal view, just based on looking at all those channels, is that there are biases in every form. You know, Nietzsche said there are no facts, only interpretations. And so there's some truth in that because we're human. However, I think I'm just trying to question the intensity and the degree and the polarization that occurs in these channels. the Globe and Mail is leans conservative, but I think has a good solid supporting, kind of reporting range, and so I tend to rely on it because I think and I purposely read more than one paper, some old-fashioned read the papers, because I'm desperately trying to get a balanced view. The problem we have as human beings is that we will actually eliminate things that are inconsistent with our existing perceptions at any rate. We'll only retain those things that square with what we already know, and we'll only recall those things that are consistent with our current belief systems. So we have a lot of ways to reinforce what we believe is the truth before we hear anybody else's opinion. And I think social media exacerbates that problem, in my view. So I'll just leave it at that. I think we'll resolve that, or world peace or war with that.
I think it's interesting. I'd love the audience's feedback because as a VW owner, it was. I think they're probably an example of it going very bad, like a brand. I mean, the brand value of VW, and I haven't been really privy to their social media aspect of it, but more of an
the
advertising.
brand was on fire.
Yeah, like you couldn't get the car you wanted because you were on a waiting list, and then this happens, and the brand, so it'd be interesting to see what the brand. I'm not really aware now. Was that brand so strong that it's still?
Well, I think it's still surviving as a brand and likely will. And I think the one thing we need to talk about in connection with some of the CSR is that it's the job of the executive team and the board of directors to try to maximize shareholder value. So yes, we can give stuff away, and if it doesn't help our business, then shareholders will say, well, why are we doing it? I do believe that if we act in a manner consistent with the goals or the purpose, the principles and the values stated as a corporation, and we are consistent with that, and we do things that reinforce that, it will help our business. I believe that. I've seen results of that. And I think that's the part that sometimes as consumers we say, well, they just have a profit motive. So they're only doing it and fill in the blanks because they want X. And I think we always have to be, buyer beware. We have to be aware of the fact that people do have a motive in life. And what is their motivation? But I do believe that companies have learned that by doing good things can happen and will happen to them. And I think that my hope is that this is going to continue to evolve. I think that CSR is an important area. It's going to continue to intensify, become more important. It's more and more important as a recruitment tool, too. You can't recruit anybody these days unless you really have a culture that is positively oriented to doing something of purpose. And I think that that's a great evolution that I'm seeing in our corporations.
I think you can't lose sight of the fact, I think you said early on that you can't give away money unless you make money.
Yep, that's true.
So you have to find that balance, and I think we can never lose sight of the fact that unless you have a profit, you don't have the ability to give back. Yeah. And so that's one of the things so how do you find that balance and how do you make it work?
And I think I'm seeing also from a hiring perspective that people are working out of university and this is just again my own experience, that I'm getting people that are on the third or fourth job, and at first they wanted corporate and fast and Toronto or New York, and then once they worked in this thankless industry, then they saw what they actually wanted out of a career wasn't so money driven and kind of loops back around from a satisfaction perspective and has more of a rounded option, and I don't want to say millennials, but the people that I'm working with, or a lot of the millennials, have a different view than my generation, I think, and they're coming in and saying, so, actually, and they're asking it in the job interview, they're strong enough, they're not like, I'm so excited to have a job, like they're actually asking and making sure that the alignment of our values as a company really fit into what their purpose is.
You can blame people like me. I'm a baby boomer. I helped raise these things, these kids. And because it was so competitive when I was going in out of school to get a job. It's called boomers because there's so many of us. We were in deep competition, and I've said to my coworkers, I work for packaged goods companies. So, and I want to learn the discipline of marketing problem solving. And so there was never a question of, are you coming in on Saturday? What time are you coming in on Saturday? So I would say things to my kids like, hey, that's not the kind of life necessarily that I think is a good life. Giving yourself, don't sell your soul to the company store. I feel like I had to give up too much. It was a survival mechanism. People say, well, you're loyal to the corporation. Well, it's just kind of a survival technique there. And so I'm not saying that you are a product of your environment to a certain extent. And so we as baby boomers were the ones saying to our children, you can be anything you want, and you don't have to fit into the corporate envelope. We may have been a little light on the training required. That's the one thing I will say. We may have been a little light there. But I think they're a product of how they were raised and the expectations we created societally for them. And I think celebrate it. Good. I'm glad they're asking those questions. We just don't have very good answers sometimes.
Yeah, you talked about students a little bit, and so there are students here, and I work with students every day, so I'd like to get your point of view on what students should know about CSR. Why is it important for them to gain exposure, not just in the business school, but in any of their academic training? What should they know about CSR when they're coming to you for a job, or what they should know about themselves? So I make my students develop a code of ethics for an advertising agency, and I say, what industries will you not work with? What brands will you not work with? What types of advertising products would you not feel comfortable providing? And one thing that always kind of catches them too is they'll say guns and tobacco and alcohol and gambling, and I say, how about the banks? And they're like, why the banks? And I said, who provides the funding and the money and the financing to all those sin industries that you just mentioned? And they're like, that doesn't matter. It's not related. So I sort of think that there's so many considerations for job seekers. What do students need to know?
Well, I think you have to have a balance. I think it's really important to have the balance as a young person to know where they want to be. And I think I always embrace the young people when they come and volunteer at community care. They do student placements and things like that. And much to the chagrin of a couple of parents, I've had students change out of what they thought was what they wanted to do, and then they've gone into social service, and their parents said to me, one of them was a professor from Brock, how could you do that to my child? She's never going to make any money. But I said, she's going to have lots of job satisfaction. So I think, but what you think you want to do sometimes until you experience different things, I think is what it is. But the corporate social responsibility you see when you give back. So if you come into an organization that depends on people giving back, then you can see what it means to give back. And I think that if you go to a business and you see what they do, and then you've learned from somewhere else, you can bring that skill set to you. But I certainly think that I would encourage any young person to volunteer at whatever position they want to do, whatever field of interest they have, and have an understanding of that. But I think they will learn what's expected of them when they go out into the workforce, when they do that. And I probably hasn't answered the question from a totally business perspective, but I think it's really important for them to have an understanding of what it means, what corporate social responsibility or social responsibility means, because I firmly believe that any community is only as strong as its weakest link. And so how can you have that impact, and how can you connect your skill set and align your values and your beliefs to that and make that into a career? I started off in fine arts. And I can tell you that I will say that what fine arts taught me was to be able to look at a person, and I can see the beauty in any person that an artist can see in a canvas, because I was taught to look at a canvas and look at a piece of art and understand what it was. And you can find beauty in anybody. And in social services, I can find beauty in anybody. I just have to look at it, and I look at some of the most disheveled people that come in, but they still have something very pure. And I walked through the hall the other day, and this woman came up to me and hugged me and said, "I will never forget what you did for me." And she was because I didn't have anything, and I've gone back and I'm considered to be successful now. So in a roundabout kind of a way, I think we have a soft side to us, all of us, that we can bring out and we can align it with what we want to do in life. And I think we're all richer as a result when we do that.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Over to Jeff. Oh, thank you. It's actually, he wants to make.
Oh, it's time for Q&A. We talk too much on that time.
Isn't it true that statistically, most people who do volunteer work are people from the lower income? And conversely, that you really can't throw money at a problem, just money. There has to be understanding of the underlying concept and the problems. Why can't corporate and people who want to volunteer, but who may be financially challenged or, don't have the money to give away, but may have knowledge and capability and skills, why can't that be integrated better in society?
I think it's getting better. It's certainly better since I've been involved, and I cited a few organizations that I work with in the community, and they're encouraging their staff to do it now. And these are people who have educations, they're right up there in, I can tell you, Canadian Tire. They'll come right up to the very top and come and help on days of work and things like that. And I think it's becoming a lot better than you think it is right now. And they have a better understanding. And I think, yes, some of the people who have never had before have a better understanding of what it is to do without, and now they have the ability to give back. But I think that there is a definite push now for other people, for businesses, to get their employees involved. Not all. I know there's a business in town, and it's not my job. It's the government's job. So they won't do anything. That's fine. But there's others that go over and above, and they find that their employees work together better, they're happier, and they're listed as one of the best companies to work with for Canada. And you look at Meridian and you look at Canadian Tire, they're right up there in terms of places that people want to work because they teach them that value system when they're in there.
I think too, Lou, I learned a lot from your tube drive for give me the correct name.
Tuesday? Yeah.
Tuesday.
Raising
So we our group volunteers to serve breakfast, and they let me take the money, which I was crazy. Like, my math, I took more from some. I was like, come on. But there was several instances where I had a delightful experience where the people that were paying the $5 or this $10 said to me, Betty Lou helped me when I needed help, and I'm here now. Like, they didn't look like they had $5 to have the breakfast. But, like, to your point that, they should have probably saved that $5 for later on. But they were here to support the cause because they could afford the $5. And it was pretty amazing. Like, these are, it really looked like they couldn't afford that $5, but they felt like they had to give back to the homeless, and pretty amazing experience. And again, from a team building perspective on our part, the girls had a really great energy going into the workday because they're up at 7 o'clock till 9 and volunteered, and it's a great event. So, I think the schools have to be involved. I think the government has to be involved in making this a part of, just like drinking milk, it's good for you, and I think it should be part of the social culture of Canadians to on a small scale, like in a small town, all the way to into the big cities. I think it should be part of the curriculum at a school level as well. And you know, I'm so excited. My girls are going to come to your, you know, I love the idea that you can actually see the food bank. Like, you know, sometimes it's lost, you know, like you do the food drive, but you don't know where you know where you drop it off, but you don't actually see the people that it affects. So I think that connection between that one more level, especially for a 6-year-old boy, is probably changed his life. He doesn't know it, you know. I think it's pretty amazing.
But so schools, I can tell you honestly, schools, if you remember a few years ago, I can't remember which government was in, and I'm not going to get myself in trouble and pick on one over the other, but and they made it mandatory for kids to volunteer, right? And they came in, and the first generation absolutely hated it, and the only reason they were doing it was because they were forced. But now that some of them have had a positive experience, they go back to their kids, and we can't accommodate enough of them for that because they all want to do that part. So it started. We have to answer your question, it started. We have to keep that momentum building because it's there, and I think it's really important. But it's a really valid question, and I think that it is growing. Continue to make it grow, and it will be, you know, it will be a better place. I'm confident that the world is going to be a better place with this generation than it was. I mean, every generation has its thing to do, but the new generation is learning more and more and more. And I think that it's going to be we're looking after each other better. Are we looking after each other well enough? Absolutely not. But it's a lot better than where it was when I started, what I was doing 25 years ago. So,
Great. We have another question at the back.
I'd like to observe, coming off of your comment that it's getting better, because I think it's not getting better.
okay.
I observe, I got my MBA in 1973, so I've had the time to see it and work and retire. I have the advantage of being retired. But I think today's CEOs, especially of large corporations, are using CSR, which is a new term to me tonight. To be the better they can be at the CSR, the worse they can be as Volkswagen, for example, as we talked about earlier. I'm good at CSR, so I can be incredibly the opposite in my warranties, and that's what I observe happening today at a pace that is frightening. I wonder if the room feels.
But would that have been any different if there wasn't any CSR? I think that those things would have happened anyway.
But I just think that they're more bold at them because they have CSR to hide
They can
behind.
hide behind.
Yes, that's the
I
observation.
do think some companies use these CSR initiatives to kind of rebuild reputation or to buy permission to operate. But I do think that there's a lot of social responsibility activity and environmentally driven activity that is totally unrelated to that. And I think as we age, I'll share a comment with you. I'm probably closer to your age than I am to some of the people in the audience here. And so I think, you know, we learn that, you know, to be skeptical of things because you start to see certain patterns and we notice things. And then I think the news today exposes more things than ever before. There was just lots of things that went on when I was younger that, you know, that they weren't amplified the way they are. Everything now on the internet is organized and amplified, and whereas if somebody made a mistake, you know, 20 years ago, you'd hear about it through far different channels. Now, if that mistake is made and it's severe enough, everybody in the entire planet knows about it in a relatively short period of time. So I think it gives us at least a perception that behavior is degenerated and deteriorating. And I'm not so sure that's the case. I think there's a lot to be skeptical about. So I don't disagree with that sentiment. But I do know for a fact that there's an awful lot of investment in communities on behalf of organizations, some big, some small, that has nothing to do with buying permission to operate. But I will acknowledge that there are companies, something goes off the rails and they say, we got to do something to make ourselves look better to offset that. So you're not incorrect to say that it happens, it does. I can't be sure what the incidence of that.
And I just speak, the good news is that I feel like everybody that I'm interviewing, if I'm hiring, I'm about to hire, in that millennial age, they're questioning my values and why I support what I support. And so the good news is that maybe the amount of access to this fast news or this, you know, the amount of data and everything, the Twitter, like, and everything, that you're getting so much kind of noise. I think the good news is from a little spot in downtown Thorold, I feel like I'm almost getting part of my interview process is also getting, you know, at the end of my interviewing of a new employee, I say, do you have any questions for me? And they come well prepared from Brock, because I have quite a few Brock students that work with me, with an actual list of questions that are pertaining to a number, like, what about this? How do you envision my job in, you know, how do you envision me growing as a person within the, like, very real questions that I never would have asked if I was trying to get employed at the time where I was coming out of university. I was just like, they're going to give me a job? Okay. You know, what time on Sunday do I, you know, Saturday or Sunday do I need to be there? So I think the good news is that maybe there are the Volkswagens of the world. I think the great news is that I think the community of workers, or the people that are about to go into the workforce, there's great news that there's going to be an accountability that these corporations are going to have to hold to, you know.
Hi, so on the topic of jobs then, I'm wondering what type of opportunities or career opportunities there are in this specific area. Specifically because as a student you learn, if you want to go into HR, you can become a recruiter, or you can go into training. If you want to get into finance, you can be an investment banker. But if you want to get into CSR or sustainability for private organizations, how can you get there as a student coming out of university? Because I feel like it's more of this unknown area that just happens. We just see it happen, but who actually does it, and how can you be the person that's doing that in that organization?
I know that I did a bunch of interviews with managers and people in the music industry, and even as you might not think of the music industry as being a focus of social responsibility, but there's actually consultants and managers who focus on sustainability of live events, on community impact, how to green your music festival and things like that. So there's usually a chief sustainability officer or chief social responsibility officer. Obviously, unfortunately, like right out of your undergrad, you won't be the chief anything, I don't think. I was making photocopies and walking files all around downtown Toronto way before the internet existed and things like that. So, yeah, but I think there are departments, and I think they're growing in importance as well. So, are you seeing these in job ads, like entry level in sustainability, or not?
I honestly, like, looking for jobs, I don't see anything, and I think that's part of the issue. And I don't really know if there's enough emphasis on when you're actually in university to be making those career choices, because do students actually want to be doing this? Is there enough demand for these type of positions? And I'm just wondering what your perspective is on it, and if students want to be going into this, and how they can get there, and if there's any opportunities out there, because I haven't seen a lot.
Well, I think just to reinforce what Todd's saying, there are no entry-level sustainability roles, but there are sustainability thinking tends to come through various streams. One would be through the human resource stream, another through the corporate communication stream, where you're trying to do stakeholder analysis and create programs that are designed to help shape opinions about organizations. And so I think knowledge of that is, I think to study it, first of all, in classes like Dr. Green teaches, is an important beginning, because I think it creates an awareness of it. And it's still an evolving space, but the reason why I would pursue it is that I think corporations are still trying to figure out what they should say and how they should say it, and they're experimenting. And I think it's millennials who are driving it. So to me, if I'm a millennial today and I want to work for a corporation, my easiest point of entry is going to be through social media. Because, millennials are they're kind of digital natives. And the people who are hiring you are digital immigrants. All right? They are. And they're afraid of it. And so they need someone to help them. And doing, I think, community management through social media channels would be a great way to get a view of what people say, how they say it, what their motives are, what winds their watch, what really angers them. And I think that becomes a really important input to the thought process of how do we as an organization begin to respond to these shifting demands. And really, it's millennials that are pushing this agenda. So I think, to me, that would be one suggestion, would be going through that channel. And so that's really about communication, it's about marketing, and then, as you probably are aware, corporate social responsibility is engineers contribute to it because they're trying to reduce carbon footprints, and so it takes a lot of people to think about that, but it takes very few to direct it. So that would be my suggestion.
I think you would explore a company that aligns with your beliefs, and I think that you can look at some of them that have their sustainability plans, what they believe in, what their philosophy is within their community. You align yourself with that organization and you watch what happens when you're in there. I know a young girl who became involved in an organization, and she has moved all the way up because she started something as small. Well, it wasn't small to her, but she started the United Way campaign, but she built relationships within. She was the one that picked Mikey, nobody wanted to do it. She says, I'll do it. And so she started from one thing, and then she was called upon to do something else, and something else, and then something else in the company. And she's moved on in the company, and that's the kind of job that she does right now. So she aligned herself with an organization that had the same beliefs, but then she volunteered to do different things within the organization and moved on up through that way.
And I think exactly, like if you can find that, so say you're looking in Niagara, I think the other thing is and I've had experience both in my organization and friends that have done this, where you find a marketing company, you find an agency, and you walk in very confident as a Brock grad and say, my vision is to have a job like this, and I am willing to come every Saturday or every Tuesday or whatever it takes to see if I could do a CSR plan for you, or can I pitch something to you? Because there's a lot of noise out there, but actually, coming in and I'm speaking, somebody came in to me and said, this is what I'm graduating from Brock, this is what the type of job I envision, I'm willing to volunteer, and we hired her after, her volunteer, she did 2 months volunteer, and then we hired her. I think we've hired pretty much anybody that's been a co-op student from Brock has ended up with maybe not their perfect job with me, but they've transitioned from a co-op situation to a part-time or a full-time job afterwards. So I think you have to think outside it, like looking on a job posting board is not going to get you that job. To think creatively and say, you know what, I envision this type of job. Maybe if I did it for Shannon, then I did it for free for Shannon, but now I can go and pitch 5 other companies to say, this is what I did for, I'm just saying for me, but for this company, and you have some traction because you've done it. Because I can imagine it overwhelming. It's like, how the heck do you get a job within this field, right? Or I think there's, again, it's hard to say to you volunteer, but if you can volunteer and have a company allow you to volunteer and see what actually is happening, I think it really gets your eyes open to what's going on. And I think to being that person that's willing to do it. So in our organization, that they're willing to say, and I think that I have a lot of strong opinions. My my staff will say about what I like to volunteer and what I like to donate my time. But if one of my staff came to me and said, this is really near and dear, this United Way or whatever is near and dear, here's what I'm suggesting as a team we do, I'd like to pitch it to you, we're totally open to that.
I agree.
You know? And I
Do
think
exactly the
that,
same
I think it's funny when you have a boss, you're not willing to pitch, but I think that there's just only so many hours in the day, and I think if you collectively get a few people together on my team, I'd be like, yes, I want you to do it. Even because a lot of my staff goes for, we pay for kind of extra education, so if they want to take a course or something. But I'm not going, you really should take a course. Like, I'm going to pay, I'm going to foot the bill. So, you know, I think if you pitch it, you'll see that that's what employers, I think, are looking for, at least a lot in Niagara as well.
I feel like Sandra Bullock. I don't know if you say that, but in the movie, which was Miss Congeniality, right? And she's at the end, and she says, "I really do want to save the world, right? Or world peace, right?" And I think from a business community, I think many people are sitting there saying, "I want to make the world a better place, right?" And to go through that process. So I'm just wondering, you know, Todd and company, if you could think about it, what would be the one thing that you would invite, whether it's government or whatever, or people, individual things to do? How could we work together so that we do make business matter?
Well, I worked in what was considered like an evil industry of commercial insurance. Nobody likes to pay for insurance, and we did a lot of stuff as a team, and I feel like maybe the negative sentiment towards big business, it's probably justified to some degree. There are companies that are there for the big oversized check picture with puppies and babies and things like that, because everyone loves when companies help puppies and babies. But I think just being more genuine and getting individual employees to start forming committees and working together, I think that's one way. Maybe I'm biased as a researcher, but some of my work I'm looking at what does research say and what are practitioners doing. And I think there's a massive gap, because when I worked in industry, I didn't read academic articles to inform my opinions. And most people in the room probably don't read academic articles, except for a few people over there. It's just not what we do. So I think making research more accessible and making it make sense and actually learning from practitioners versus us thinking, well, no, we know better. We have PhDs, so we know how to research. I think we need to collaborate better with the real world as well and learn from each other in that regard, because best practices exist. I don't really have research to do unless companies are talking about CSR, unless they're putting out campaigns. I'm not inventing CSR campaigns that companies are doing. So I think there's a way to learn and work together in a much more efficient manner.
I think you create the environment, the inviting environment, and to open your minds to the possibilities. And I think that if you create the environment and the opportunity and encourage people, encouragement is huge. Sometimes you have to say, okay, give them a little bit of a boost to get there, but I think you have to, and keep having the dialogue. I think that's really important, to talk about it and to give people opportunities and to show them examples how easy it is to do. And it's not donating a building, it's donating a couple hours of your time. And what difference does it make? And I think it doesn't have to be huge. You know, it could be a box of cereal that's changed a kid's life. Or it could be $1 million to the university. It doesn't matter. There's somewhere in between. But everybody has the opportunity to give something. And if they give nothing but give of themselves, it's a start. It's a better thing. And some people will only ever have the ability to give of themselves. And we all have that within it. We all have the knowledge that we can share. We all have the talents that we can share. So each one of us has something that we can give. We just have to do it.
I agree. I think that it's important that there needs to be mentoring and I think if you do business with passion and you love what you do and you are aware of the impact on a social, on environmental, and a sustainable way that I really liked the way you said it's I think knowing what you've accomplished, what you'd like to accomplish, and what you haven't accomplished, and where you'd like to be, and having that vision of knowing that you're never going to accomplish it all. You're never saving the entire world, but knowing that if you're a graduate, you can do this amount. If you're, doing that small footprint, I think it's really important that's shared over everybody in the room. If everyone in the room volunteered and gave what they could, it's very impactful, not just two people,
I think a lot of organizations now, whether they're for profit or not for profit, are thinking less in terms necessarily of CSR and more on social impact, which I think is a nice shift. I would say too that continuing to support and reward innovation and giving young people who have an idea about bringing something to the marketplace, giving them an opportunity to benefit from mentoring from large corporations that may help them. And there's an organization in Kitchener-Waterloo called Communitech, where they put large corporations together with startups, and they try to help each other solve problems. I think that's quite unique and inventive. And I also think, as a nation, we're bringing a lot of immigrants into our country, and I don't think we're giving them an opportunity to unleash their creativity and their thinking, because we're just not organized to support that. And I think the better we get at that, the more innovation and change we'll bring. And so I would say that's a couple of things I would personally like to see.
Can't see Souter, so that's we're done. Okay. All right. I can talk about CSR forever, as you can probably tell, but sadly we don't have forever. You all have to at some point leave and go home. But we had such a great panel. I really enjoyed to get to see the different views from all of you, and I really appreciate you giving your time to be here tonight. So thanks so much for being a part of it, and thank you everyone else who came tonight as well.
Thank you.